Some people might only know Tippi Hedren as the woman who starred in Alfred Hitchcock's 1963 film The Birds. However, like any other person summed up in one accomplishment, there was far more to Hedren's life than just that. How Tippi Hedren suffered from being Alfred Hitchcock's darkest obsession. Make sure to watch the video until the end and leave your thoughts in the comments. If you're new here, join our wonderful community by subscribing to the Age of Vintage channel. Tippi Hedren, Tiger Queen of Hollywood. Tippi Hedren, Alfred Hitchcock's dark obsession. Hedren is one of only two performers in the history of Hollywood to have worked with both Alfred Hitchcock and Charlie Chaplin, arguably two of the greatest British filmmakers who ever lived. The only other performer to have Chaplin and Hitchcock films on their resume was Norman Lloyd. Tippi Hedren was born to the couple Bernard Carl and Dorothea Henrietta (née Eckhart) Hedren on January 19, 1930. She was born in New Ulm, Minnesota. Hedren's grandparents were refugees from Sweden, and her maternal lineage was from Germany and Norway. Bernard Carl owned a general shop in Lafayette, Minnesota. The family shifted to Minneapolis when Hedren was 4. In case you're curious, the name Tippi has a meaning derived from Hedren's Swedish background. In that language, Tippi means sweetheart. The nickname was given to her by her father when she was a toddler, and she decided to make it her stage name. Hedren took part in the fashion shows of the departmental stores. The family shifted to California when Hedren was studying in high school. Hedren was still in high school when her conventionally attractive looks led to her building up a career as a model. She would model for local fashion shows and commercials that played within her home state of Minnesota. Hedren joined Eileen Ford Agency in New York on her 20th birthday. She made an appearance in a musical comedy, The Petty Girl. She in her early days was not keen on acting in films, as she thought she might not make a successful career. More so, she was having a successful modelling career in the 50s and 60s, performing on the front page of Life, the Saturday Evening Post, McCall's and Glamour. Hedren's first husband was an 18-year-old advertising executive named Peter Griffith. Married in 1952, Hedren and Griffith would remain married for around 9 years. It was during this time that Hedren gave birth to Melanie Griffith, her only child. Tippi Hedren, along with her daughter Melanie, relocated to California in 1961 with the hope of pursuing her profession. But things were not smooth for her. In her first appearance in a TV commercial, Hedren was so worried that people would mock her inexperience with cigarettes that she developed a smoking habit purely so she could look convincing on the small screen. Hedren was a big fan of cats. I mean cats like Lion and Tiger, and would own several house cats over the course of her life. Interestingly, she named 2 of said cats after her co-stars. One was Sean Connery, with whom she starred in Marnie, and Marlon Brando, who was her co-star in A Countess from Hong Kong. Speaking of Sean Connery, Hedren would later admit that Connery had been her first celebrity crush, which must have made the chance to work with him all the more exciting. She came into contact with Alfred Hitchcock in 1961. Hedren was asked to appear in a leading role in the under-production film The Birds. Tippi Hedren was offered a leading role in the film Marnie in 1964. This film was the preferred one of the 2 films she did with Alfred Hitchcock. The reviews were very good. Hedren's relation with Hitchcock was not that pleasant. Hitchcock was obsessed with her. In 2012, Hedren featured in The Girl. This film is based on Hitchcock's behaviour with Hedren. There were views for and against the film. Despite the plethora of handsome leading men that she's acted alongside throughout her film career, Hedren categorically denied having ever had a fling with any of them. In case you doubt the power of that kind of resilience, keep in mind that she worked with Burt Reynolds, Sean Connery, Marlon Brando, Kiefer Sutherland, Jude Law and James Brolin. According to Hedren, she was once propositioned for a sexual fling by a famous American politician when she was on vacation in the south of France. Despite his charm and good looks, Hedren didn't want to spend the night with him since they were both married at the time. In case you're curious, the man would become US President John F. Kennedy. In 1963, Alfred Hitchcock had a huge amount of power in Hollywood. That's when he plucked actress Tippi Hedren from relative obscurity to star in his new movie, The Birds. It was a big break for Hedren. The camera zooms in on a beautiful blonde woman asleep on the lawn. You can pick out livid scars on her eyelids, cheek, neck and hands. As her 3-year-old daughter gleefully runs out and jogs her mother awake, the woman sits bolt upright. She starts shrieking and frantically scrabbling in the air as if she's fighting off a flock of imaginary angry birds. She does this for several seconds before falling sobbing into her daughter's arms and hugging her so tightly that she knocks the young girl's boater off. This is what Alfred Hitchcock did to Tippi Hedren. Hitchcock's heroines weren't all blondes. There were strong, independent, dark-haired leading ladies like Teresa Wright and Margaret Lockwood, and light brown-haired Joan Fontaine and Ingrid Bergman. But it was with Grace Kelly, whose allure Hitchcock was never able to fully shake off, that he cemented his reputation. He looked to find another actress who could fill her shoes. First Vera Miles, then Tippi Hedren. In addition to being elegant and beautifully dressed, these women could be brave, plucky, sensual, complicated, obsessive, and most important, sympathetic. While Hitchcock's films have been considered misogynistic for the way the women are seemingly punished, he takes the heroine's point of view in many of his films. Hitchcock's films were cruel, but his behaviour behind the scenes was even crueler. Tippi Hedren has revealed how Alfred Hitchcock allegedly assaulted her while they were working on the films The Birds and Marnie. She says director grabbed her, attempted to kiss her, and had a secret door installed between his office and her dressing room. Hitchcock's abusive behaviour began when he cast Hedren in The Birds, her first film and Hitchcock's follow-up to Psycho. Hedren alleges that the director ordered other cast members not to socialise with her or touch her, and grew petulant if he saw her talking to other men. She says she began noticing that Hitchcock became cold and a bit petulant whenever he saw her talking to a male cast or crew member. She claims he once threw himself on top of her and tried to kiss her while they were travelling in his limousine. The next day on set, while filming the famous phone booth scene in which Hedren's character is attacked by birds, she says one of the mechanical crows broke the supposedly shatterproof glass, shards of which hit her in the face. She also says that in a scene where her character was attacked by the birds in a bedroom, she was told the mechanical birds would not work and that they would have to use live ones. She allegedly spent 5 days filming the scene with live birds being thrown at her and attached to her body with elastic bands. Hedren says she broke down when a bird that had been attached to her shoulder almost pecked her in the eye, and she spent the following week in bed, exhausted. Hedren suspects that Hitchcock was attempting to punish her for rebuffing his advances. The next film under Hedren's contract was Marnie, about a kleptomaniac with mental health problems. It includes a scene in which Hedren's character is raped by her new husband. Hedren believes that the scene of a man forcing himself on his unattainable beautiful bride was Hitchcock's personal fantasy about her. The director's behaviour continued, Hedren says, and he commissioned a replica mask of her face for himself, even though it was not needed for the film. Hitchcock would find some way to express his obsession with me, as if I owed it to him to reciprocate somehow. One day, Hedren says, he summoned her to his office. He suddenly grabbed me and put his hands on me. The harder I fought him, the more aggressive he became. Then he started adding threats, as if he could do anything to me that was worse than what he was trying to do at that moment. He tormented her. He would drive by her house at all hours, stare at her and send her baskets of food when he worried she was losing weight. When Hedren fought him off, Hitchcock promised, "I'll ruin your career." Nobody had any real answer for how I was going to solve the problem, Hedren says. Alma, his wife, she said, "I'm so sorry you have to go through this. I said, "Well, can't you stop it?" I was angry and I was hurt that I had nobody to say, "OK, we'll help you." Hitchcock reportedly grew frustrated at her resistance and threatened to ruin her career. Hedren says he blocked the studio Universal when it wanted to submit her performance for an Oscar and talked disparagingly of her to others. She was still under contract to him for 2 more years, and Hitchcock refused to allow her to take work with other directors. This, combined with the studio's reluctance to antagonise Hitchcock, meant her career never recovered. Studios were the power, and I was at the end of that, and there was absolutely nothing I could do legally whatsoever. There were no laws about this kind of a situation. If this had happened today, I would be a very rich woman. In 1964, Hedren won her only Golden Globe for her performance in The Birds. Interestingly, the category was the now defunct Most Promising Female Newcomer. The last time that Hedren met with Alfred Hitchcock was in 1966. He and his wife, Alma Reville, took her out to tea in London while Hedren was working on A Countess from Hong Kong. Seeing as Hitchcock had been committed to destroying Hedren's career, he was deeply resentful that she'd been cast in such a big film. Unsurprisingly, this made for an awkward meal. In the mid-1960s, veteran filmmaker Charlie Chaplin got into contact with Hedren and offered her the role of Marlon Brando's estranged wife in A Countess from Hong Kong, which would become Chaplin's final film. However, he wouldn't let her see the script until she agreed to do the film. Given that it was Chaplin, Hedren was only too happy to sign on. But when she arrived, she found out that her role was basically a cameo appearance. When she asked Chaplin why he'd deceived her and been so secretive, Chaplin admitted that he'd been convinced that she wouldn't have come if she'd known how small her role was. The irony, of course, was that Hedren was only too happy to have done the film in any part, regardless of size. Hedren married Noel Marshall on September 22, 1964, and broke up in 1982. She again married a businessman, Louis Baronecchia, in 1985, but divorced in 1995. She got engaged to a veterinarian, Martin Deans, from 2002 to again break up in 2008. Despite the difficulties of working on Marnie, especially given the unwanted sexual interest from her director, Hedren still considered it to be the favourite of her films, as she loved playing such a complex and interesting character. Despite all the ugliness, she says she felt a wave of sadness when Hitchcock died in 1980, and she attended his funeral. He was, she writes, a brilliant filmmaker. One of Hedren's most lasting contributions to American society stemmed from a visit she made in 1975 to a refugee village comprised of people fleeing the Vietnam War. Hedren wanted to make them acquire a skill set to begin a new life in the US, and she was inspired by the women's fascination with how she'd done her nails. Tippi Hedren helped the progress of nail barbershops in the USA. She helped many women in learning the art of manicured nails by employing her manicurist to teach them the ins and outs of the trade. Hedren arranged for those Vietnamese women to earn their licenses and also got them jobs in salons. More women followed in their footsteps, even as these original students went on to open salons of their own. The rest is history. At the age of 88, Hedren was cast in a series of commercials and advertisements for Gucci's line of jewellery and timepieces. If you liked this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, subscribe if you are new here, and if you want to support my work, please visit my Patreon page. Now it is your turn. What do you think about the life and legacy of Tippi Hedren? It would not be easy back then when studios and the powerful directors were the kings of Hollywood.